Beneath the resplendent glow of the chandelier, Lily stood in her pristine white wedding gown, but her heart was as cold as the darkest night. Forced by her family into a sham marriage with the millionaire Ethan, she believed she was merely a pawn to settle their debts. But on their wedding night, a shocking secret unraveled. Ethan knew she was the daughter of his old enemy, and the fire in his eyes burned not with love, but with hatred. Each step through the opulent mansion was a descent into a labyrinth of deceit, where old letters, locked doors, and a tarnished ring guided her toward a deadly truth. Can Lily shatter the curse of the past, or will she fall victim to a conspiracy woven 2 decades ago? Tune in to uncover the gripping, twist-filled tale. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on every thrilling moment of the contract beneath the lights. Lily stood before the grand mirror in the opulent room, her trembling hands brushing the delicate veil of her wedding gown. The light from the crystal chandelier danced across her face, but it couldn't dispel the darkness suffocating her heart. Today, she would become the wife of Ethan, a mysterious millionaire she'd met only a handful of times in cold, calculated negotiations. This marriage wasn't born of love. It was forged from a contract signed in black ink and desperation. Her family, once a proud and prestigious lineage, now drowned in debt, and Ethan was the only one willing to settle their staggering obligations at the cost of her becoming his wife. When the maid softly knocked, signaling the ceremony's start, Lily felt her feet turn to stone. The lilting strains of violins drifted from the banquet hall, but to her, they were no different from the clang of an iron gate slamming shut. She drew a deep breath, fighting to hold back the tears threatening to spill. In the mirror, she saw a beautiful bride, but her eyes shimmered with fear and unease. Ethan, with his sharp, icy smile and inscrutable gaze, was a puzzle she didn't know how to solve. All she knew was that, from this day forward, her life would tread a path shrouded in uncertainty. Lily stepped out of the room, each footfall on the crimson carpet pulling her toward an inescapable fate. The hall was resplendent, brimming with white roses and flickering candlelight. Yet the atmosphere hung heavy, more like a business deal than a wedding. The guests, mostly Ethan's business associates, whispered among themselves, their curious eyes scanning her. She felt their scrutiny, as if they knew she was merely a pawn in his game. Ethan stood at the end of the aisle, his black tuxedo hugging his frame, his face cold yet undeniably magnetic. As she drew near, he extended his hand, but his grip was stiff, devoid of warmth. The wedding vows were recited, but to Lily, they were hollow words. She repeated them like a marionette, her heart weighed down by dread. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Ethan leaned in, pressing a fleeting kiss to her cheek. The crowd applauded, but the kiss was frigid, a stark reminder that this was only a transaction. Lily searched his eyes, yearning for a spark of emotion, but found only an impassable wall. He guided her through the crowd, a flawless smile on his lips, yet his hand tightened around her wrist, as if to control her every move. The reception that followed was a lavish spectacle. Sparkling champagne flutes clinked, and congratulatory toasts echoed. But Lily felt like an outsider. She sat beside Ethan, listening as he conversed with his associates, his voice steady yet razor-sharp. Occasionally he turned to her, resting a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of affection, but she knew it was all an act. When a guest inquired about their love story, Ethan answered smoothly, "She's my destiny." The word sent a shiver down Lily's spine. Destiny, or a meticulously crafted plan? As night fell, Lily was ushered to the bridal suite in Ethan's sprawling mansion. The room was exquisitely decorated, with a grand bed draped in white silk and soft light glowing from scattered candles. But the air was stifling, as if every corner hid a secret. Lily perched on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding gown, her hands clasped tightly to still their trembling. She didn't know what awaited her. Did Ethan truly expect a wedding night, or was this just another clause in their contract? She had no time to ponder further, for the door opened, and Ethan stepped inside. He said nothing, silently removing his suit jacket and hanging it on a rack. His gaze swept over her, slow and piercing, as if appraising a possession. Then, unexpectedly, he pulled an old ring from his pocket, its dull stone catching the faint light. "Have you ever seen this before?" he asked, his voice so low it seemed to freeze the room. Lily shook her head, her heart pounding. She didn't understand why the question filled her with such dread. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes boring into her. "Don't lie to me, Lily," he said, his voice dropping, laced with menace. "I know who you are." His words struck like a blade, slicing through her defenses. Lily felt the blood drain from her veins. He knew who she was. What did he mean? She was just a girl forced into this marriage by her family, a victim of circumstance. But Ethan's eyes told a different story. They held not just suspicion, but a profound pain, a suppressed rage long held in check. She wanted to ask, to explain, but her throat felt strangled. Ethan turned away, leaving the ring on the table, its dim stone glinting like a warning. He left the room without another word, abandoning Lily to a maelstrom of confusion. She sat there, staring at the ring, her mind reeling. There was something in Ethan's past, a secret tied to her or her family, that she'd never known. She recalled her mother's hushed whispers about her father's troubles, always evaded when pressed. Had her father done something, and now she was paying the price? Lily clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She didn't know the truth, but she felt it in her bones. This marriage was more than a contract. It was a chessboard, and she stood at the heart of a storm about to break. The first days as Ethan's wife were a whirlwind of tangled emotions for Lily. His sprawling mansion, with its endless corridors and impeccably decorated rooms, offered no warmth. It only deepened her sense of isolation. Each morning, she awoke in the frigid bridal suite, a room Ethan never returned to after that first night. He slept elsewhere, a silent but unmistakable declaration. This marriage existed only on paper. Yet in the presence of servants and visiting guests, Ethan played the part of the perfect husband. He called her darling, in a tender tone, rested his hand on her shoulder with feigned care. But whenever their eyes met, Lily saw only an unbridgeable void. She tried to adapt to her new life, but every corner of the house seemed to harbor a mystery. The servants, though polite, kept their distance, their eyes darting away whenever she asked about Ethan or his past. Once, when she casually mentioned the ring from their wedding night, the elderly housekeeper Clara grew visibly flustered, hastily changing the subject. Lily's unease grew stronger. She began noticing small details, a locked door at the end of a hallway, late-night phone calls Ethan took in hushed tones, the way he fell silent the moment she entered a room. Something was hidden, and she knew that unless she uncovered it, she would remain a puppet in his game. One afternoon, with Ethan away at a meeting, Lily resolved to explore the house. She wandered through dusty rooms where old family photos lay neatly packed in wooden boxes. One image caught her eye. An older man with a warm smile, standing beside a young boy whose eyes were unmistakably Ethan's. The man seemed strangely familiar, yet she couldn't place him. When she flipped the photo over, a faded handwritten note made her heart clench. Charles and Ethan, 1995. Charles. The name stirred a vague memory, like a story her father once told, but it slipped through her grasp. Curiosity pulled her to Ethan's study, a place he rarely allowed her to enter. The door was unlocked, and she stepped inside, her heart pounding. Towering bookshelves brimmed with business documents, but her attention fixed on a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of papers. She opened it to find old letters, some yellowed with age. One bore her father's name, Henry, written in bold yet trembling script. The letter was brief, a few lines apologizing for an irreparable mistake. Lily felt the blood freeze in her veins. What connected her father to Ethan? Why did Ethan keep this letter? Before she could read more, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Panic surged, and she stuffed the letter into her pocket, closing the box. Ethan entered, his eyes sweeping the room, as if sensing the disturbance. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low but razor-sharp. Lily fought to stay calm, claiming she was looking for a book. Ethan said nothing more, but his gaze lingered on the wooden box too long, sending a shiver through her. She knew he didn't believe her, and from that moment, the air between them grew taut with tension. In the days that followed, Ethan watched her more closely. He appeared unexpectedly, while she strolled in the garden or read in the parlor, asking casual questions, but his eyes probed, waiting for her to betray a secret. Lily felt like prey under a predator's gaze, yet she couldn't stop. The letter in her pocket burned against her, urging her to seek the truth. She began noting clues: Charles's name, her father's letter, the strange ring. Each piece led to a larger question. What did Ethan truly want from her? One night, a storm crashed over the house, thunder and lightning rattling the walls. Unable to sleep, Lily's mind churned with questions. She left her room, wandering the dark corridors, and overheard Ethan's voice from his office. He was on the phone, his tone low and furious. "I've found her," he said, "but I need more time to be sure." Lily's heart thundered. Her? Was he talking about her? The call ended before she could hear more, but his words planted a new seed of fear. She retreated to her room, clutching herself in the darkness, feeling trapped in a conspiracy she couldn't escape. The next morning, Ethan surprised her by inviting her for a walk in the garden, a rare gesture that set her on edge. In the pale sunlight, he seemed less intimidating, but his eyes remained sharp. "Do you ever think about your family's past, Lily?" he asked, his voice soft but laced with intent. She shook her head, hiding her panic. Ethan smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Good. Some things are best left undisturbed." His words were a warning, but they only ignited Lily's resolve. She knew she could no longer live in shadows. Whatever the truth, however painful, she had to face it. The storm from the night before had left the garden in chaos, with broken rose branches strewn across the path. Lily stepped over them, her shoes caked with mud, but her mind was elsewhere. Ethan's words from their morning walk in the garden echoed relentlessly in her head, a riddle without an answer. Some things are best left undisturbed. But she couldn't let them lie dormant, not when each passing day dragged her deeper into a labyrinth of secrets. The letter from her father, hidden carefully in a drawer, was proof that her family's past was intertwined with Ethan's, and she was determined to uncover the thread that bound them, no matter the cost. She began to move with greater caution, realizing that Ethan was not only intelligent, but unnervingly perceptive. Every gesture she made in the house seemed to catch his attention. From the way she paused before an old painting to the fleeting glance she cast at the locked door at the hallway's end. To deflect suspicion, she tried to play the obedient wife, attending dinners with him and his associates, smiling when he introduced her as "my beloved wife." But each smile was a struggle, and every touch of his hand sent a shiver through her. Not from fear, but from another emotion, a stirring she refused to acknowledge. One evening, Ethan announced he would host a grand party at the mansion to welcome a new business partner. Lily saw it as a chance to observe him, to search for more clues. She chose a deep emerald silk dress, its hue striking yet understated, and stood by Ethan's side as guests began to arrive. The party buzzed with laughter and light, but Lily sensed an undercurrent of tension. The guests, though courteous, eyed her with curiosity, as if privy to something she wasn't. One man in particular, elderly with silver hair and a gaze sharp as a blade, drew her attention. He shook Ethan's hand, but his eyes lingered on her too long, making her feel exposed. While Ethan was occupied with conversation, Lily watched the man closely. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to power, but there was something in his stare, not mere curiosity, but recognition. She struggled to stay composed, her heart pounding as he suddenly approached. "You're Henry's daughter, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. Lily froze, unsure how to respond. She nodded, forcing a smile. "Did you know my father?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man smiled, but it was a chilling, hollow expression. "More than just knew him," he said, then turned away before she could press further. His words left her reeling. As the party reached its peak, she slipped away from the ballroom, heading to Ethan's study. She knew she was taking a risk, but the urge to uncover the truth outweighed her fear of being caught. In the darkness, she rifled through drawers, searching for anything tied to her father or the mysterious man. At last, she found a bundle of old documents, hidden at the bottom of a locked drawer. Inside were business contracts from 2 decades ago, bearing her father's signature and that of someone named Charles, the name from the photograph. Her pulse raced as she skimmed the pages. They mentioned a major project, a failed investment, and angry handwritten notes accusing her father of betrayal. Before she could read further, the room's light snapped on. Ethan stood at the threshold, his face shadowed with fury. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" he said, his voice low but cutting like a knife. Lily shot to her feet, still clutching the documents, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She wanted to explain, to ask about her father, about Charles, but Ethan's gaze silenced her. He strode forward, snatching the papers from her hands, yet in that moment, a flicker of pain crossed his eyes, as if he too were being torn apart by the past. "Go to bed, Lily," he said, his voice weary. "Don't make this worse." She left the study, her legs heavy, but her mind raced. The man at the party, the documents, Ethan's reaction, they all pointed to a truth just out of reach. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though she stood before a locked door. She recalled Ethan's eyes, not just angry, but steeped in profound sorrow. Was he the enemy she'd imagined, or was he, too, a victim of the past? She didn't know, but she resolved to press on. She would find the truth, not only to protect herself, but to understand the man she was beginning to feel an inexplicable connection to. The next morning, as she ate breakfast alone, Clara, the housekeeper, placed a cup of tea before her. "You should be careful, Miss Lily," she said, her voice soft but weighty. "Some things in this house are better left undisturbed." Lily met her gaze, searching for more in those aged eyes, but Clara turned away. The warning didn't frighten her. It only fueled her determination. She knew she was treading a dangerous path, but there was no turning back. The truth, however painful, was her only way out. Lily awoke in the dim light of dawn, feeling as though she hadn't truly slept all night. Fragments of the past, the letter from her father, the documents in the study, and Ethan's anguished gaze swirled in her mind, a puzzle that refused to come together. She sat by the window, gazing out at the garden, now tidied after the storm, but her heart remained in turmoil. The confrontation in the study last night had left a crack in the fragile bond between her and Ethan. Yet instead of deterring her, it only steeled her resolve. She couldn't keep living in suspicion, not when each day pulled her deeper into a perilous whirlpool. Ethan was absent at breakfast, and Clara informed her he'd left early to attend to urgent business. His absence brought a fleeting sense of relief, tinged with unease. Lily knew this was a rare chance to search for more clues, but she also recognized she had to be more cautious than ever. Ethan was not a man easily deceived, and she couldn't let him discover she was delving into his past. She decided to shift her approach, not just scouring the house for answers, but seeking to understand Ethan himself. What had shaped him into this enigmatic, anger-driven man? She began by engaging Clara, the only person in the household who seemed to show her any kindness. In the kitchen, as Clara prepared lunch, Lily deftly posed casual questions about Ethan, about his childhood. Clara responded vaguely at first, But when Lily mentioned the photograph of Ethan with the man named Charles, a flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. "That was his father," she said, her voice lowering. "Mr. Charles was a good man, but fate was unkind to him." Lily pressed for more, but Clara swiftly changed the subject, as if afraid she'd revealed too much. Though it was a small piece of information, it was enough for Lily to grasp that Ethan's story began with his father, and perhaps with whatever had befallen him. That afternoon, Lily resolved to leave the mansion, her first venture out since the wedding. She told the driver she wanted to stroll in the city, but in truth, she headed to the public library, a repository of old business records. She hoped to find details about the project mentioned in Ethan's documents, the one linking her father and Charles. In the quiet library room, she pored over aged newspapers, articles about major companies from the 90s. At last, she found a brief report, its headline chilling. "Shocking financial collapse. Charles Langley and Henry Whitmore face disaster." Her heart raced as she read each line. The article described a massive investment project between the two men, but a financial scandal had bankrupted Charles's company, with Henry, her father, suspected as the culprit. She photographed the article, a chill running down her spine. Her father had never shared specifics about his past, only saying he'd lost much due to mistakes. But if he had truly betrayed Charles, Ethan had every reason to despise her. Yet her father's apologetic letter contradicted that notion. He'd written of an irreparable mistake, but never admitted guilt. Lily felt as though she stood before a painting missing a crucial piece. She left the library, her mind spinning, but her determination unwavering. Upon returning to the mansion, she found Ethan had returned. He stood in the living room, gazing out the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand catching the golden-orange glow of sunset. He didn't turn as she entered, but his voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Where have you been?" Lily flinched but quickly regained her composure, saying she'd gone out to clear her mind. Ethan turned, his eyes scanning her, searching for a hint of deceit. "Don't test me, Lily," he said, his voice low but menacing. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." His words sent a shiver through her, but she held her ground. She realized Ethan wasn't just guarding his secrets. He was grappling with something deeper, a pain he couldn't fully conceal. In that moment, she dared to ask, "Why did you choose me, Ethan? If you knew who my father was, why make me your wife?" The question stopped him cold, the glass in his hand trembling slightly. But instead of answering, he only stared, his eyes brimming with conflict, then turned away, leaving her in a suffocating silence. That night, sleep eluded her. She pulled out her father's letter, rereading each line, hoping for a new clue. But what caught her eye wasn't the letter's content. It was a faint stamp in the corner, the name of a company, Aurora Ventures. She'd never heard of it, but she jotted it down, vowing to investigate further. As moonlight streamed through the window, a new resolve settled within her. She wasn't just seeking the truth to protect herself, but to understand Ethan, the man who, despite her reluctance to admit it, was slowly claiming a corner of her heart. The morning light slipped through the curtains, casting a soft glow on Lily's face as she sat at the breakfast table, but her thoughts were far from the present. The stamp of Aurora Ventures on her father's letter had become an obsession, a new clue dragging her deeper into the maze of the past. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, but the truth was no longer just a means to escape her contractual marriage. It was the key to understanding Ethan, the man who stirred her heart with a volatile mix of fear and an emotion she dared not name. Ethan was absent from the mansion that morning, and his absence offered a rare moment of stillness for her to press forward on her quest. Lily resolved to return to the public library, where she had uncovered the article about her father and Charles. This time, her focus was Aurora Ventures, hoping to unearth any scrap of information about the enigmatic company. In the hushed library room, she sifted through old records, yellowed pages whispering tales of businesses that once dominated the corporate world. At last, She found a brief document about Aurora Ventures, a small investment firm established as a subsidiary of the grand project between her father and Charles Langley. But the final line stopped her cold. The company had been dissolved after a lawsuit tied to financial fraud, with a name cited as the mastermind behind it: Victor Grayson. The name was no stranger. It belonged to the elderly man with the piercing gaze she'd met at Ethan's party. Her heart pounded as the realization hit. Grayson didn't just know her father. He might be the one who orchestrated the downfall of both their families. She photographed the document, a fierce wave of emotion surging within her. If Grayson was the true culprit, why was Ethan targeting her? Did he know the truth? Or was he too ensnared in a lie from the past? She left the library, carrying both answers and new questions, determined to confront Ethan. Back at the mansion, she found Ethan in the living room, his eyes darkening as she entered. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice icy yet betraying a trace of suspicion. Lily chose not to evade. Summoning her courage, she met his gaze. "I'm trying to uncover the truth, Ethan. About my father, your father, and Aurora Ventures." The mention of the company froze his expression, as if she'd touched an unhealed wound. He stepped closer, his eyes ablaze. "You don't know what you're doing, Lily," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "Stop, before you ruin everything." But Lily pressed on. She recounted her findings, the article, the document, and the name Victor Grayson. She wanted to see his reaction, to know what he was hiding. Ethan listened, but his gaze shifted, the anger giving way to a profound pain. When she mentioned Grayson, he abruptly turned, slamming his fist against the wall, the sound startling her. "You think you understand everything, don't you?" he growled. "You know nothing." He stormed out, leaving Lily in a haze of confusion, yet with a glimmer of hope. His reaction suggested he wasn't the enemy she'd feared. He too was battling a ghost from the past. That night, sleep eluded her. She retrieved her father's letter, poring over each line, desperate for another clue. She noticed a detail she'd overlooked. The date on the letter matched the time of Charles's company collapse. It meant her father had written it right after the disaster, but why hadn't he explained clearly? She felt as though she stood before a wall, one missing piece away from breaking through. She made a bold decision: to confront her mother, the only person who might know the full truth. The next morning, she called her mother, arranging to meet at a small cafe outside the city. When she arrived, her mother, Eleanor, was already there, her face etched with worry. Lily didn't mince words. She placed the letter and a copy of the Aurora Ventures document before her. "Mom, I need the truth," she said, her voice steady. "What did Dad do? Who is Victor Grayson?" Eleanor paled, her trembling hands touching the letter. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice choked with emotion. Lily's father and Charles had been close friends, building a grand dream with Aurora Ventures. But Victor Grayson, a third partner, had manipulated the records, causing the project's failure and plunging both families into ruin. Her father was blamed, but he couldn't prove his innocence. Lily listened, her heart constricting. Her father wasn't a traitor, but he'd chosen silence to shield their family from Grayson's vengeance. Eleanor gripped her hand, tears streaming down her face. "You shouldn't dig deeper, Lily. Grayson is dangerous." But Lily couldn't stop. She returned to the mansion, armed with her mother's revelation and a renewed resolve. She had to tell Ethan, to tear down the wall between them. She found Ethan in the study, alone, staring at an old photo of his father. She approached, placing the copied document about Grayson before him. "You need to read this," she said, her voice quivering yet firm. Ethan looked at her, suspicion in his eyes, but he picked up the papers. As he read, his face transformed, from doubt to shock, then agony. He shot to his feet, tossing the document onto the desk. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. But Lily stood her ground. "Because you deserve the truth," she said, "and because I don't want us to keep living in darkness." Night descended, cloaking the mansion in a heavy veil of darkness, but within Lily, a fire blazed. The confrontation with Ethan in the study had left her in a tumult of hope and unease. When she placed the documents about Victor Grayson before him, she had yearned for a shift, a moment when the wall between them would crumble. But Ethan's reaction, a volatile mix of anger and pain, made her realize that the truth was not just a key to their freedom. It was a blade that could carve deeper into old wounds. She retreated to her room, sitting in the shadows, her heart torn between a longing to trust Ethan and the fear that he would never forgive her family's past. The next morning, Ethan was absent from breakfast, and Clara informed her he had left early. His absence brought a fleeting relief laced with anxiety. Lily didn't know if he had thoroughly read the documents she'd given him or if he was simply dodging the truth. But she couldn't wait. Victor Grayson, the name that had upended everything, now anchored her search. She resolved to dig deeper, not only to prove her father's innocence, but to shield Ethan from his own blind rage. She felt an inexplicable bond with him, an emotion she couldn't deny, though it terrified her. Lily returned to the library, armed with a new list of questions. She focused on Victor Grayson, seeking any trace of his actions after the Aurora Ventures scandal. In the hours spent poring over bookshelves, she unearthed an old article in an obscure business journal. It revealed that Grayson had resurfaced years after the debacle, building a new financial empire under a different name. What stunned her was a small detail. Grayson's new company was linked to one of Ethan's major partners. She photographed the article, a chill gripping her. If Grayson was still scheming in the shadows, was he pulling Ethan's strings? Or worse, was Ethan unknowingly working with him? She returned to the mansion, her mind reeling with theories. Stepping into the living room, she was startled to find Ethan there, his eyes heavy, as if he hadn't slept. Before she could speak, he broke the silence, his voice low and weary. "I read your documents." The words sent her heart racing. She waited, hoping for more, but he only stared, his gaze fraught with conflict. "You think this changes anything?" he asked, his tone bitter. "Your father still destroyed my family." Lily shook her head, striving for calm. "No, Ethan, Grayson was behind it all, and he's still out there." She shared her discoveries, the article about Grayson, his ties to Ethan's partner, and the possibility of his ongoing manipulation. Ethan listened, his face impassive. When she mentioned Grayson's new company, a spark flashed in his eyes, as if a realization had struck. He stood abruptly, striding to his desk and retrieving a file. "You're right about one thing," he said, his voice hushed. "Grayson. I've suspected him for a while, but I had no proof." He handed her a contract, where Grayson's company name appeared, concealed beneath a facade. Lily skimmed it, a thrill mingling with fear. Ethan had known about Grayson but hadn't acted, not from reluctance, but from a lack of evidence. She saw a chance for them to join forces, to confront their true enemy together. "We can stop him," she said, her voice resolute. "But you have to trust me." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes wavering between doubt and something else, perhaps respect. "Trust you?" he echoed, his tone sardonic yet no longer cold. "You make that difficult, Lily." Their conversation halted when Ethan's phone rang. He frowned, answered, and his face darkened. When the call ended, he turned to her, his voice urgent. "Grayson just contacted me. He wants to meet. Now." A jolt ran through Lily. This could be their chance to face Grayson, but it was also a grave risk. She grasped Ethan's hand, a sudden move that froze them both. "Take me with you," she said, her voice trembling but determined. Ethan looked at her, his gaze softening for a moment, then nodded. They left the mansion in silence, seated in a sleek black car gliding through the city streets. Lily's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the unexpected closeness with Ethan. He said nothing, but his hands, gripping the steering wheel, tightened more than usual. They arrived at a modern office building, where Grayson awaited in a luxurious meeting room. He smiled, but it was a frigid, predatory grin. "Ethan, you brought your new wife," Grayson said, his eyes raking over Lily. A chill seized her, but she stood tall, refusing to let him see her fear. The meeting swiftly turned into a battle of wits. Grayson spoke of a new deal, but Lily sensed he was probing, gauging how much Ethan knew. She watched Ethan, noting his calm demeanor, yet his eyes were sharp, like a hunter biding his time. When Grayson carelessly mentioned Aurora Ventures, Lily couldn't hold back. "You haven't given up your old games, have you, Mr. Grayson?" she said. Her words froze the room. Grayson stared, his smile stiffening, and Ethan, without turning, gently squeezed her hand beneath the table, a small gesture, but enough to tell her he was on her side. The meeting room grew stifling after Lily's bold words. Victor Grayson's gaze, sharp as a blade, locked onto her, but she refused to flinch. Beneath the table, Ethan's gentle squeeze of her hand was an unexpected surge of strength, a silent vow that they stood united, even though mere hours ago, she had doubted whether he truly trusted her. Grayson quickly regained his composure, his smile returning, but it couldn't mask the tension in his eyes. "Young lady, you have quite the imagination," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with menace. Ethan, maintaining an air of calm, steered the conversation back to the business deal. But Lily knew this was no mere negotiation. It was a chess match, and they had just made their opening move. The drive back to the mansion was heavy with silence. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his knuckles whitened, betraying his unease. Lily longed to ask what he was thinking, to know if he truly believed Grayson was the mastermind behind it all, but she held back. She realized that Ethan, for all his strength, was wrestling with inner demons. The years spent growing up in the shadow of his father's loss, haunted by whispers of her father's betrayal. As they stopped at the mansion's gate, Ethan broke the silence, his voice low. "You don't have to do this, Lily. This is my fight." She turned to him, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "No, Ethan, it's mine too." Her words seemed to strike a chord. For a rare moment, Ethan's eyes softened, and she glimpsed a flicker of genuine emotion. Not anger, not suspicion, but gratitude. But he quickly looked away, stepping out of the car, leaving her with a racing heart. She knew a fragile but real bond was forming between them, one that filled her with both hope and fear. She didn't just want to help Ethan uncover the truth. She wanted to free him from the hatred that had imprisoned him for so long. In the days that followed, Lily and Ethan began working together, though their collaboration was fraught with tension. Ethan opened a window into his world, sharing business documents and contracts tied to Grayson and his new company. Lily realized he was not merely the cold millionaire she'd once perceived. He was a man who had built everything from ashes, armed with a razor-sharp mind and unyielding will. But she also saw the scars he hid, the nights he sat alone in the study, staring at his father's photograph, or the way he deflected when she asked about the years after his family's collapse. They pored over the documents together, searching for concrete evidence to expose Grayson. Lily suggested contacting a former Aurora Ventures employee who might know details of the old fraud. Ethan initially resisted, wary of the danger, but Lily's steadfast resolve swayed him. They located a man named Martin, once the company's chief accountant. Through a clandestine call, Martin agreed to meet at a secluded cafe, but he warned, "Grayson's not someone to cross lightly. He has eyes everywhere." The meeting with Martin unfolded in a taut atmosphere. A wiry man with anxious eyes, he recounted what he knew about Aurora Ventures. According to Martin, Grayson had manipulated financial reports, siphoning funds into secret accounts and pinning the blame on Lily's father and Charles. When Martin tried to expose the truth, He was threatened and forced to leave the company. He handed them a USB drive containing copies of old documents he'd kept. "This is all I have," he said, his voice quivering. "Be careful. Grayson doesn't forgive." As they left the cafe, Lily felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her. The USB was the evidence they needed, but she knew they were stepping into treacherous territory. Ethan, beside her in the car, remained silent throughout the drive home. When they pulled into the mansion's garage, he suddenly took her hand, his eyes brimming with determination yet tinged with worry. "If this goes too far, I want you to step back," he said. Lily shook her head, her voice unwavering. "I'm in too deep to stop, Ethan, and I won't let you face this alone." That night they reviewed the USB's contents together. The numbers, contracts, and old emails painted a vivid picture of Grayson's deceit. But what stunned Lily was an email from Grayson to an unidentified recipient, mentioning a plan for revenge against both Charles Langley and Henry Whitmore. She glanced at Ethan, seeing his face darken. "He destroyed both our families," he said, his voice hoarse. Lily placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture of comfort, but it prompted him to turn and meet her gaze. In that moment, the space between them seemed to shrink, and she felt his warmth, a closeness she never thought possible. But the moment shattered when Ethan's phone rang. He frowned, answered, and his face paled. When the call ended, he turned to her, his voice urgent. "Grayson knows we're investigating. He just sent a warning." A chill gripped Lily, but she refused to let fear take hold. She clasped Ethan's hand, her eyes resolute. "We'll end this," she said. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his lips, not the cold smirk of their early days, but a genuine one, however small. They stood in the dim study, aware that the path ahead was perilous, but certain they were no longer alone. Grayson's warning hung in the air, a dark cloud heralding an approaching storm. Lily and Ethan sat in the study, the faint glow of the desk lamp casting shadows over scattered documents, each page a fragment of the truth they had poured their hearts into uncovering. The USB from Martin held undeniable proof of Grayson's manipulations, but both knew that confronting a man like him required more than evidence. It demanded courage and a flawless plan. Lily's heart pounded, not just from the looming danger, but from the newfound closeness with Ethan. He was no longer the cold stranger of their early days. He was a partner, someone she had learned to trust, and perhaps something more. Ethan broke the silence, his voice low but resolute. "We need to act fast. Grayson isn't the type to make empty threats." He opened his laptop, drafting an email to a trusted lawyer, attaching the USB's files. Lily watched him, seeing beyond his tough exterior to the immense burden he carried, not just the quest to avenge his father, but the duty to protect her. She placed her hand on his arm, a small gesture that made him pause and meet her gaze. "We'll do this," she said, her voice unwavering. Ethan didn't reply, but his eyes, for the first time, brimmed with warmth. They spent the day preparing, reaching out to reliable contacts and crafting a strategy to expose Grayson. Ethan proposed a press conference to unveil the documents and call for an official investigation into Grayson's actions. Lily agreed, but insisted they meet Grayson once more, not to negotiate, but to provoke him into revealing his vulnerabilities. Ethan initially resisted, fearing for her safety, but the fierce determination in Lily's eyes swayed him. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said, a fleeting smile crossing his lips. His words sent her heart racing, but she quickly refocused on the task ahead. The meeting with Grayson was set at an upscale restaurant, a venue he often used for covert dealings. As Lily and Ethan entered, the air in the private room seemed to freeze. Grayson sat at the head of the table, a smug smile on his face, but his eyes were razor sharp, as if he'd anticipated their intentions. I must admit, you two are persistent, he said, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. Fury flared within Lily, but she held her composure, knowing this was their moment to seize control. Ethan spoke, his voice icy, yet commanding. We know everything, Grayson. Aurora Ventures, the secret accounts, and how you destroyed 2 families. Grayson laughed, but the sound couldn't hide his tension. You think a few old papers can bring me down? He asked, his gaze flickering to Lily. And you, little girl, do you really believe you can rewrite your father's past? Lily stood firm. She pulled a copy of an email from her bag, one where Grayson admitted his revenge plot. This isn't the past, she said, her voice steady. This is the truth, and it ends today. Grayson's face paled, but he quickly regained his poise, attempting to deflect with threats. You have no idea who you're dealing with. But Ethan was ready. He pressed a button on his phone, and a recording played. Grayson's voice, confessing his manipulations to an associate. Grayson's expression froze, panic surfacing for the first time. Lily and Ethan rose, knowing they held the upper hand. The press conference is tomorrow, Ethan said, his tone cutting. You can face justice or keep running. They left the restaurant, leaving Grayson in a deadly silence, though both knew he wouldn't surrender easily. That night, in the mansion, Lily and Ethan sat together in the living room, the fireplace's glow dancing across their faces. For the first time, their conversation strayed from Grayson and the past to themselves. Ethan spoke of the years after his father's death, how he'd built everything from nothing, and the loneliness he'd never admitted. Lily listened, her heart melting. She shared memories of her father, the warmth before her family's downfall, and how she'd accepted this marriage to protect her mother. When she paused, Ethan took her hand, his eyes sincere. I was wrong to blame you, he said, and I don't know how to thank you for not giving up. In that moment, bathed in the firelight, they were no longer bound by a contract. They were 2 souls who had found each other amid the wreckage of their pasts. Ethan leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, and Lily felt a peace she'd never known. But the moment shattered when Ethan's phone rang. It was his lawyer, his voice urgent. Grayson's gone missing. We suspect he's planning retaliation. Lily and Ethan exchanged a glance, knowing their fight was far from over. The next day, the press conference unfolded as planned. Before dozens of reporters, Ethan revealed the documents, recounting the story of Aurora Ventures and Grayson's deceit. Lily stood by his side, pride mingling with anxiety. As the conference ended, news of Grayson spread swiftly, and the police launched an investigation. But Grayson remained at large, and Lily knew they had to stay vigilant. She and Ethan returned to the mansion, no longer as paper-bound spouses, but as partners who had chosen each other, ready to face any challenge.